This is episode 2 on race. Something I noticed with race and COVID specifically was the microaggressions that completely came out of everybody against Asian people of Asian descent and Asian Americans. It was a really bad time for a while for those of Chinese descent because there was a lot of hate crimes going on because of their race and because Chinese specifically were associated with the source of COVID. Many found that they were an easy target to blame, and therefore, all sorts of deviance started to happen. We see people attacking Asian Americans on the street, or Asian Americans not being able to be hired during this time because of the fear that they were carrying COVID. We also see a lot of media, anything represented in the media about this type of stuff was, in general, was not in a good light about Asian Americans. We have Donald Trump specifically calling the coronavirus pandemic I think it was the Chinese flu. But it was not a good representation of that minority during this time. And then we also see the positive side. Vaccine comes out, it's widely available to everybody. I don't feel there was much discrimination on how they got the vaccine out, but we do have that lack of trust from certain minorities because of the government's past in abusing healthcare against minorities, specifically African Americans. So when we look at the prejudice in the past with types of diseases that have been coming along, we definitely see that represented this year when we had the vaccine, and many were skeptical due to America's history in vaccines and minority groups. So that was really big for it definitely slowed the deterrence of COVID a lot because of the mistrust for the vaccine. Yeah, I think there was definitely some pushback on getting the vaccine, and from African Americans specifically, they don't necessarily trust. And then again, going back to the Asian hate and the China flu, there not only was stereotypes, which were, ideas that this disease was the Chinese fault, even if they are Americans, but then there was also prejudice. People truly believed that it was their fault and that they were to blame. And then some even took it as far as discrimination. And as Mariah mentioned, there were hate crimes, and they were being portrayed poorly in the media. And sadly, race, it is institutionalized at the structural level, and there is not as much media coverage on the Asian and Chinese side for the coronavirus. They didn't get to say their side of the story. Us Americans didn't see theirs. And then back to the African Americans being skeptical of a vaccine our government wants to give them. That goes back to the long-term impact those that have access to this false information because it is so easily publicized on their platforms, whereas we see predominantly white-used apps tend to monetize their content a lot more. Looking at Facebook specifically, we have seen that many Hispanic backgrounds use Facebook or WhatsApp, and I know me myself received a lot of false information about COVID, talking about the vaccine, how it gives people autism. It was very widespread, and I think that has to do a lot with our history of not protecting minorities from this false information over generations. Alright, well, that's all we're gonna have for today. As you know, this is an ASMR podcast, so make sure to subscribe, and our type of research has to do a lot with field notes and our morals and values, so take that in mind when listening and being one of our viewers. I hope you had a wonderful